Everyone treats summer like it owes you happiness. Long days, pool parties, your best life on a loop. So what does it mean when you feel worse? The summer blues are real. It's why summer is one of the busiest stretches of the year for people starting therapy. Therapy is not only for when you're in crisis. Growth therapy is for all the moments when you decide you want more. More support, more clarity, more tools. Mental health isn't a destination you reach. It's something you build, and Grow makes that easier. Grow connects you with thousands of high-quality licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. The therapist you want takes your insurance on Grow. Grow accepts over 125 insurance plans. Sessions average $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/book now today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/book now. growtherapy.com/book now. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
If your fashion wish list lives rent-free in your brain, you need to be on Poshmark. With Poshmark, you're shopping millions of listings from thousands of closets, each curated by someone with their own style. Vintage finds, designer pieces, and everyday staples all in one place. Search for your favorites or let the discovery come to you. Poshmark makes it easy to find what you actually want to wear at prices that feel like a quiet win. Download the Poshmark app today and use code PODCAST10 when you sign up to get $10 off your first purchase.
Well, welcome to Black Men Speak, podcast where black men share their stories, their journeys, and wisdom they've gained along the way. I'm your host, Keith Dent, and today we have the privilege of welcoming a man whose life has been defined by service, leadership, and the unwavering commitment to making a difference. Our guest is Dr. Erroll Southers, a nationally recognized expert in counterterrorism, a former FBI special agent, former assistant chief of police, accomplished educator, and one of the nation's leading voices on homeland security and public safety. Throughout his remarkable career, Dr. Southers has served at the highest levels of government while remaining committed to integrity, justice, and creating a meaningful change. Today, we're talking about his compelling new memoir, Inside the Castle Walls: An American Journey Through Espionage, Counterterrorism, and Government. It's more than a story about public service. The book is deeply personal reflection on perseverance, purpose, and what it means to navigate powerful institutions as a Black man determined to make a difference from within. We'll explore lessons passed down from his father, the defining moments of his extraordinary career, the challenges of leading uncertain times, and why he believes lasting change often begins by stepping inside the very systems we hope to improve. Whether you're a leader, a student, someone pursuing a career in public service, or simply looking for inspiration on living a life of purpose, this conversation is one you just don't want to miss. Now, I read the book, and it was just truly fascinating. And one, it resonated with me because it wasn't a book that I'd really probably wouldn't have picked up on my own because, counterterrorism is not my thing. I'm used to hitting baseballs and stuff like that. Listening to music. But what fascinated me was here was a brother that was on the inside of probably things we hear about. And he had a very integral part in, I guess, shaping some of the things that happen in counterterrorism that we use today. So, Dr. Southers, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for your very, very gracious introduction. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's go ahead, for our listeners who haven't yet read Inside Castle Walls, what inspired you kind of to write this memoir at this stage in your life? Having read the book, you've had a very accomplished career. So I'd love to hear why you wanted to share it with the world.
Well, thank you. And Keith, that's a very interesting story. And I always say to people, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and I'm here because of the people who did these things before me and basically paved the way for my life to happen. I wrote a book 13 years ago called Homegrown Violent Extremism, and it was a book on domestic terrorism. And coincidentally, 2 weeks after that book published was the Boston Marathon bombings, which is exactly what I was focusing on, which was homegrown violent extremism and domestic terrorism that's happening around the world. I wound up being invited to testify at the full Congressional Committee on Homeland Security hearing on the Boston Marathon bombings. And after that, I was speaking to a number of pretty extraordinary literary agents about writing another book. And they said, well, what's it going to be about? And I said, well, I'm going to write another book on terrorism. And they said, no, because they had heard about some things I had done in my life. And they said, we want a book about you. I said, well, nobody's going to read a book about me. I want to write about terrorism. So I kind of pushed back against that for years. And my co-author on this book, Justin Heintz, Justin and I were in Minnesota working on a project. In fact, it's written in this book and Inside the Castle Walls called The Minnesota Guys. And we were sitting there one afternoon and Justin said, Erroll, you really need to write this book. And I had journaled throughout my career, so it was somewhat easy to go back and get facts. And I started writing. And he said, I'm going to write it with you. And so we had been writing together for years. He's an incredibly accomplished professional writer and editor and likes to redline things. Once you get used to that, it's not hard. So I spent years putting it together and getting the appropriate chapters approved by the FBI to be put in the book after they redacted some things. And here we are. And I'm really glad that I was able to have it come out now and have it with a foreword by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a very close friend, and it's done very well.
Yeah, it was done very well. I mean, I think in the first chapter, you talked about being, I guess, sent to Asia. And I was like, okay, this could be a great fiction book, fiction novel, because I was like, okay, what's going to happen next? But then you went back and I was like, oh man, what happened? What happened? But yeah, I have to say it was very well done. I really appreciated kind of being a part of your life story, or at least reading about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So the title comes from advice your father gave you. So could you share that story and explain why it became the foundation of your career?
Well, absolutely. Like you and every other Black person in this country, I had to talk with my parents when I was a kid, although we grew up in New Jersey and a very small town. And they educated my brother and me on what we needed to do when we came in contact with law enforcement. And I was stopped enough times for nothing other than walking while Black. And after one of those occasions, I came home just really incredibly upset. My dad was in his shop working, and I stopped and I said, Dad, I can't take this anymore. I told him what happened. He listened very patiently and looked over his glasses and said, you can't change the castle from outside the moat. You want to be or see change? Be the change. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but over the years, it resonated with me. And so I was bused across town to an all-white school. I was one of 4 Black kids, the only male in the school. And I did very well. Both my parents were very well educated. And as time went on, I realized more and more what he was saying to me, that all of these systems that are designed to not include us can be changed or reformed if we are in the room when those decisions about policies and processes are being decided. And so that inspired the title of the book, and it's worked very well. And you can stand outside the castle and throw rocks against the wall. You can be inside at the table with the knights and the king. And so that's where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess the school thing and the busing really resonated with me. I had been bussed as well in the 70s when we lived in Ohio. So I really got the sense of let's say the pain or just some of the challenges you had to go through.
Yes, you know as well as I do. I mean, the N word was just part of my classmates' vernacular. And a spoiler alert for the people who read the book, N word, no offense, was like one word to me. I heard it so often. And they were just so casual about it. And you get used to it, unfortunately. But it was a survival mechanism for me and my friends to get through. And like you, my parents always instilled upon me that I had to be twice as good. It was nothing that we couldn't do. My mother was the first Black woman to graduate from the Rutgers School of Pharmacy, which I'm extremely proud of. She was the first person in our family to have a college degree. She had 2 graduate degrees before I even got to Brown University. So I'm very proud of them. And they set a very high bar, and I'm glad that they did. And as you said, it was tough, but when you get used to being the only person in the room, it's a matter of belonging. And I never felt like I didn't belong there. And that really helped me throughout my career.
Yeah, that's great. And so I think one of the things that I didn't get the sense of, and maybe it might have been something that you just didn't write about, but I'd love to hear about, is that, you were working on the inside of institutions, and we know as Black Americans, it's always those institutions like law enforcement and, kind of now with just people of color or brown people, the whole immigration department or anything governmental can be seen as with some skepticism. So how did you reconcile just serving in those institutions, amongst Black Americans while remaining true to your values?
Well, one of the things that you obviously have occur in those institutions is you become close-knit with the other brothers and sisters who are there. So when I was in the police department, it was the Santa Monica Police Department. We were all very close. And I worked in units there where, especially when I worked in specialized enforcement, when I worked gangs and narcotics, and there were some things that officers did that were beyond the pale in terms of how they treated people of color. And we called them out on it. And there are some challenges and some risks when you do that. I reached a point in my career, and I don't want to ruin the book for people who are going to read it, but they will read about things that happened to me and other Black officers at Santa Monica because we pushed back, because we weren't going to tolerate some of the things that they were saying to people in the street, because we were not going to subject them to laws and things that were on the books that they were doing, certain things off duty that were similar to that. So it was interesting. And I finally left Santa Monica PD. That was part of the reasons that I did leave. But I will say this, since my departure, they've had 3 Black chiefs and have a Black chief now. And so it worked out quite well. But as I said in the beginning, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And there were people at that department before me who looked like us, who went through some things. And I wasn't going to leave because of that. But I mean, it was one of the things that influenced me with making that decision at the time. But you don't ever want to give up your integrity. And we are always going to be seen as the other by the community. When you're in law enforcement, those things happen. But we did have relationships with people in the community to the point where there was a level of trust and we could get some things done. And I was very proud of that. And I live now being able to say, I never disrespected anybody in my law enforcement career. Anybody I ever took to jail was treated like a person, was treated like anyone else. And I'm real proud of that. And that's something I insisted from my partners, Black and white. And for the ones who didn't quite understand that, we didn't come to blows on it, but we came close. And I just told them that's not going to happen as long as I'm in your presence.
Yeah. And that was definitely one thing that I saw that was evident. Just the humanity you brought to the job, especially in the law enforcement position. And it may not necessarily be in the book, but was there a time where just how you approached, I hate to say criminals, but a suspect or someone you thought had committed a crime helped diffuse a situation where they were kind of surprised by how you treated them?
Oh yeah, I had more than one conversation, especially with African Americans saying, we're one-on-one saying, look, I know what's going on here. Help me out. All right. help me out so we can get through this. Even if they had to be taken into custody. One thing I insisted on, especially when I worked gangs, we never arrested anybody in the presence of their children if we could avoid
okay.
it.
Wow.
That was another rule that I had. We are not putting handcuffs on mom or dad with their children watching if we could do it in a way that was safe. And we insisted on that because that's not an image I wanted those kids to see. So we had conversations, and I had street cred with a number of people who were gangsters because they knew if something happened and they were on the wrong side of the law, there were going to be a consequence. There was going to be a consequence, but it was going to be respectful. And so we did have those conversations. Of course, I had some that, because I was in that uniform, I was the enemy. And I just had to live with that. But I'm happy to say that more often than not, because of me understanding what they were going through better than my partners, we were able to reach and de-escalate the situation in a way that we could manage it and have a positive outcome with no, let's just say, no risks to our safety or theirs.
And is it safe to say that was not commonplace?
No, you're absolutely correct, Keith. That was not commonplace. I mean, de-escalation is a term that's only really come into the vernacular in the last 10 years. The thought process decades ago was we'll just deal with it with overwhelming force. And when all else fails. And unfortunately, that always produces a negative outcome, sometimes for the officers and always for the people in the community. So we had to get away from that way of thinking and deal with it in a way that was a little bit more humane and empathetic. And there's nothing wrong with, and it's unfortunate that people have embraced this notion today of, if you will, professionalism. There is nothing wrong with apologizing or saying you did something incorrectly. We all have character flaws. And the sooner that officers understand that, and the sooner that people understand that you can apologize and still move on, I think the better the outcomes will be for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So during your time in your different positions, you've kind of lived through moments where national security, race, and politics intersected. So what concerns you most about how those conversations are happening today? Because in today's times, they seem rather fragmented.
What concerns me most, and I'll work through the details, is that we are being systematically removed from the conversation. There were times in my career where I was the only person in the room who looked like me. Now, what I'm seeing is, particularly at the national level, is we are not in the room at all. So that voice that can say, perhaps we need to consider this, or perhaps we need to entertain another option, there's no one there to voice that opinion because there's this homogenous demographic that's occupying the room. So that concerns me most. I think that we have to ask ourselves a question. Are these organizations selecting the best people as they were before? I was a presidential nominee for President Obama, and I can tell you that the bar, the standard for consideration for presidential nomination has dramatically changed from what it was in 2008 or 2009 when the president nominated me. The resumes, the expertise, the experience, the body of work that people had was just extraordinary. I was humbled to be amongst those people. That is not the case anymore. So when you have people that are in the room that may or may not be qualified to be there, and B, don't represent a way of thinking that they're not used to because they aren't of that demographic, be it gender, race, nationality, ethnicity, et cetera, you're fraught with the challenge of understanding how you're going to have a policy developed that's going to be equitable and fair for everybody. I think that's going to be difficult at best. And so that's what concerns me today, is the absence of critical thinking and the absence of a diversity of thought.
Okay. What I found interesting, though, just based on the book, it seemed to me it was more, you were more the exception, just based on your I guess, greatness, for lack of a better word, just what you've accomplished. I mean, yes, you did have some mentors along the way, and I'm not trying to give anything away, but Arnold Schwarzenegger was one of your close friends, and would you say, I guess, your friendship helped vault you in places that you might not have got in if that hadn't happened?
I would say his friendship has been very, very helpful. He's helped me make some decisions, and we both know we won't give the spoiler alert on the conversations that he and I had in the book, but they were very helpful. I had two Black mentors. One was Jim Davis, who's a frat brother like you and I, in Alpha Phi Alpha Incorporated.
Yes, that's right.
Who gave me tough love throughout my career. He's the reason I wound up going on to get 2 graduate degrees after that. And Jim Butts, who was the mayor of Inglewood and who I worked for at the LA Airport Police. I would say this, though. I was the exception. I was the only Black officer to go to the crime impact team in Santa Monica. I was the first officer, period, from Santa Monica to go and be appointed to the police academy staff and become a drill instructor. I was the only Black agent in the entire San Diego division of the FBI for the better part of over a year of 175 agents. What was really important to me was that they understood I belonged there. I never felt like I wasn't there because of my color. I had, what happened in the book when officers found out I went to an Ivy League school and now I was going to be a police officer. That wasn't always welcomed with open arms by people who were intimidated by that. And no, it was never any thought about my qualifications academically, professionally, or athletically, if you will. And so I want to believe that they were coming to grips with, there are lots of people like you and me out there if you choose to have them amongst your ranks. There's an interesting movie I watched decades ago called The Lords of Discipline. And I'm not quite sure if it was a fictional film, but it was the first Black cadet at the South Carolina Military Institute. And I'll never forget what he said at the end after a year of torture as a cadet. He says, if I don't get through this, my legacy is going to hang around the rock of the next person who looks like, hang around the neck of a person who comes after me like a rock. And I have to, and that's how I felt sometimes in those positions, knowing that I was the only person, knowing I was under the microscope, and how important it was to not just do well, but to be exceptional, because they needed to understand that I was not the exception. I was the rule when it came to people who look like me.
Okay, so you felt that and you took on that responsibility, I guess, daily.
Absolutely. And I was humbled to be able to do so. And knowing that people came before me and hopefully that others who came after me may have benefited and paid it forward.
Okay, great. I like that. Love that answer. So in the book, you write about leadership under pressure. So what's the difference between, I guess, having authority and earning trust?
Well, I've always served through attraction rather than coercion. I think you get a lot more done that way. I have always wanted people who, and I'm going to say this very carefully, that wanted to grow and go, who work with me. And I never describe anyone as working for me. I work with people. The greatest success in my life is seeing students that have gone on to agencies and become stars. In fact, I taught in Europe, in France for 3 years as a result of one of my former students who was at the State Department in a counterterrorism bureau. I've seen others, grow and go to become FBI agents, State Department, other 3-letter acronym organizations who I've worked with. And the people that I have now at USC, where I'm a senior vice president, I have 3 department heads that are just extraordinary. I really just get to guide the ship because they're so good at what they do and they've got my support. So as a leader, I think it's very important to let people know that they have your support, that you'll let them know when there's a difference of opinion. I'm saddled with, of course, making the ultimate decision, but they want to be heard. And I think if people know that they can be heard throughout the organization, Keith, and that's another thing that I think is important too. All the organizations that I've led, I've known the people in the command structure, and I've known the people on the line. And that's really important, that people on the line realize that they have your ear. They don't need to necessarily go through the chain of command to let you know they have an idea. If you have 1,000 people working for you and you have 10 in the command staff, you can listen to the 10 in the command staff or the other 990 that are out there doing things every day and have ideas. And I think that's very important.
Very important, yeah. I wish more of our leaders could have that, have that idea, because there are people that could change your organization, but they usually don't have a voice. So love that. Kind of switching gears to the intelligence.
I'm Hannah. I've lost 75 pounds in 20 months with GLP-1s, plus diet and exercise. On Row, I've gone from struggling to run a mile to running farther every day. You can access FDA-approved GLP-1s online. Get the support you need to reach your weight loss goals. Go to row.co/weight to see if you qualify. I'm a paid Row partner. 20% average weight loss in 1 year in non-diabetics with obesity or overweight with a weight-related medical condition versus 3.1% in placebo arm. RX only. To stay informed about serious side effects, go to row.co/safety.
Hey, before your Q3 call, I've got the campaign brief ready, built from last quarter's data and the competitive landscape.
Great. Did you include the differentiation angle the CMO asked for?
Already in there. 3 angles no competitors using right now. Just need your approval.
Approved. Thanks. Oh, agents, where would we be without you?
Somewhere with a lot more tabs open.
Create your first Monday agent in minutes at monday.com.
A text says, "You're on my mind." A bouquet from 1-800-Flowers says, "You're my everything." Heartfelt moments belong in the real world, not just your phone. For 50 years, 1-800-Flowers has helped millions of people make memories that'll last a lifetime with gifts they'll cherish forever. Their expertly curated arrangements and gift baskets ship nationwide with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Don't wait for the next big moment. Make it when you visit 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.
Intelligence side of your career, and as someone who's seen intelligence and law enforcement from the inside, what do you wish the average citizen understood about the difficult decisions made behind closed doors? The ones that we don't see on TV.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that we have to understand that there is no 100% solution, especially when it comes to risk or safety or security. We feel as the United States, because we are militarily superior, because we have a financial system that can support practically anything we want, that you can buy your way to security. That is not true. They forget the most important element of this equation, and that's the human factor. So that's one thing I wish people would understand. We are not risk-free. There's always risks and there are always costs to what we do. And when you make these decisions, you have to weigh those things, and that's what happens all the time. And it's a dynamic process. So, the things that we may do this week in the global sense of what's happening may be different next week or even tomorrow based on the intelligence that we get. Intelligence is constantly flowing. We have to determine what's actionable, and based on that, we make decisions. I'll tell you that being someone who looks like me, when we talk about the undercover operations that I described in the book, there was a tremendous advantage to looking like me, especially when it came to some of our adversaries who didn't believe that the FBI had foreign counterintelligence agents who looked like me. And it put me in a position to really manipulate some of the targets that I worked against, because the last thing they would have believed is that I was an FBI agent. So it worked out rather well. And I was able to gather intelligence and gather information that, quite frankly, perhaps someone else may not have gotten, for the fact that they may have been more suspect quicker than I would have been in my position. So that was the fun part of it.
Wow, that's fascinating. And you would just never, think that. But I guess it also must have been pretty interesting to get to play a character, that someone that you were not used to playing, or just be a different person in those instances.
Yeah, and again, it's funny you should ask what people don't see in the movies. So one thing I want to always clear up is that I'll speak for the FBI. When you go undercover, they don't take an agent who's not expert or has experience in that space and make them do something they cannot. So, for example, years ago when Keanu Reeves was in the first Point Break and he played an FBI undercover agent who surfed, he wasn't a surfer. Well, that's not what they would do. They'd find an agent who surfed. So when I went in my undercovers, and I won't spoil it for the readers, in both of them, I had to have an expertise operationally in the space I was in. I had that expertise. What was fun about it was that you have to play a character as close to who you really are, for the fact that you're going to have conversations where you don't want to screw up. My name was close to what it is. My background, I was backstopped all the way to middle school, and in case anyone did a background check on me, and when you read the book, happened there.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you never knew when you were going to run into someone in the field, and especially since I was operating here on the West Coast, and I know a lot of people. You don't want someone to come up and say, "Hey, Erroll, how you doing? And you're with the target," and he's like, "I thought your name was so and so." So those are things that we often did. We played close to the vest with regards to who we were and our experiences. So it was more natural. But there was a lot of role playing. There was a lot of studying and background work that we did to make sure that the roles fit. But I will say this: we were never in a situation and never put in a situation due to a lack of effort by the Bureau to make sure that we had all of the resources and all of the things in place in terms of a database that if anyone were to look into our reality, our identities, they were going to find something other than what we profess to be. And that made it more comfortable.
Great. So since you talked about the identity as being a Black man, was there any unique insights that others around you just simply couldn't see in some of those moments that you mentioned, either undercover or even in the terrorism unit?
Yeah, I'll just say this. One thing that worked to a tremendous advantage was the fact that many intelligence officers from the East Bloc, and I was, as you know, in the first undercover, I was working against a person who was affiliated with the KGB. Their whole attitude was there's only 250 Black agents in the FBI. They're all assigned on the East Coast. None of them are on the West Coast. And so here I am working against this target. The last thing he thinks is I'm an FBI agent. But the other thing that I did, Keith, with him is I tried to educate him. He knew that I was supposedly someone who graduated from an elite university. I was working with him. And I let him know that my parents were always around. That myth he probably had been trained on of Black fathers not being around was not true. I destroyed that myth of Black folks being in the criminal justice system with him. He knew that both of my parents had college degrees. He knew that all my friends' parents were educated. And so I destroyed that myth. We even got into things like swimming. Not only did I swim, I was a lifeguard. So I destroyed every myth I could in working with him along the way. And those are things that my fellow agents wouldn't have had that opportunity. And because I had those conversations with him, I think his trust in me, which is what I was trying to elicit in the first place, probably grew faster and stronger because I was so candid about who I was as a person. And because of that, I was able to manipulate him in a way that readers will find out in the book to get him where I wanted him to be at the end of this process and what we intended to do with him because I was in that position. And so I think white agents wouldn't have had that opportunity or those kinds of discussions because it just wouldn't have fit. And for me, it gave him a chance to be the student with me
right
while we were developing our relationship.
Right, because he had certain assumptions that you actually had to break down the walls in order for him to even get to talk about any of the other things.
Exactly.
So he was already entering with a sense of mistrust because
Absolutely.
of being a Black man. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
He came here thinking, there's only a certain level of education. We're all in the criminal justice system. None of us are professional. We all live in cities. Nobody has a home. I mean, I just blew that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Interesting.
we became quite close because of that. In fact, spoiler alert, I used my relationship with my father to steer him into where I wanted him to go at the end of that operation. And it worked out quite well.
Right. And for that, I guess any of those undercover jobs that you had to go, what was the, I guess, break time that you needed in order to kind of get back into regular life or another job? Because I'm sure being in that position, it was very intense. You had to be, I'm not necessarily your head on a swivel, but you always had to be playing a character for, I mean, for whatever amount of time. So I'm sure there had to be some time where you had to kind of separate from that in order to get back into regular life.
Yeah, Keith, that's a great question. I will say this. It's an interesting process to be onboarded as a UCA, an undercover agent. And they had conversations with me between San Diego and Washington. I was at a point, and I point this out in the book, that I couldn't go to the office anymore. I couldn't see my fellow agents anymore. I was still on SWAT missions as a member of SWAT, but I was never really out there working cases anymore because of what I was doing in the undercover capacity. The transition is like from Friday to Monday. I mean, once that operation ends, you're back in the office, considering that target is no longer in the country or not, and you're able to transition right back into it. But
okay.
A close eye on agents. And I describe a situation in the book where an agent did start to drift and what they did with him, and people will read about that. I was fortunate that I didn't have that happen. I had a contact agent that I met with frequently. And the way I was trained, I mean, we didn't have smartphones in the 80s. So
Right.
Everything was by memory, and everything was written down if I could do it in a way that was safe. And I debriefed with him quite often. So they kept in touch with me. But the one thing that you will learn to do as an undercover agent, depending on the depth of the operation, is you will learn to operate alone. And although you may not be alone in the field when you're meeting with people because of safety reasons, you're operating alone. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I was never lonely, but there were many times throughout those months where I was alone. I had another residence. I had several other cars. That was pretty, as I said to others, I've lived out all my Jason Bourne fantasies. I had sports cars. I had a condo on Coronado Island. I had a very unique classic Corvette at one point, in addition to a Maserati. And it was an interesting life, and it was fun. But there was a mission involved, and it was really intense. And there was a lot at stake, and we were quite successful. But fortunately for me, I was contacted often enough that I never drifted. I was contacted often enough that when I had to go back into the office, it was a great transition, successful operations, and it all worked out quite well. I was well taken care of. I will say that.
Gotcha. Okay. But besides your, law enforcement and FBI and Homeland Security, working in Homeland Security, you also have been in academia and media. So out of all of those things that you've done, which role do you feel has shaped you the most as a leader?
That's a great question, Keith. There's three. Often joke and say I'm a person who can't hold a job, but I've done so many things, and it's all been opportunistic. And I've certainly not had a linear career when you consider that I went to undergrad and was pre-med and left medical school to make a hard turn and go into law enforcement. But when I served in the governor's office, when I served in Governor Schwarzenegger's administration, I was responsible for the Office of Homeland Security in his office. That was a stream that I really enjoyed. There was a time where I was the assistant chief of police and responsible for Homeland Security and intelligence at the Los Angeles World Airports, which is the world's largest airport police department. And my current role is a senior vice president, where I have safety and risk assurance for the University of Southern California. So when you ask me which one was, I'll just say it, was the most fun, I'm still having fun. I enjoyed all of them, but they were all quite different. One thing it did for me in the way of leadership is it made me become someone who really engages in enterprise leadership, knowing how to reach across sections, departments, government levels, local, state, federal, internationally. I've become pretty good at that because of necessity in those roles. So it's for that reason that I can have conversations with people globally because of those positions that I held that had responsibilities that intersected with so many different areas of the world and the government that I had to be able to do that well. So I have enjoyed all of them and still do. They were all quite challenging. And the interesting thing about your question is, now that I think about it, the governor's office position as Deputy Director for Critical Infrastructure Protection, the Airport Police Assistant Chief position, and my current role as Associate Senior Vice President at the University of Southern California were all inaugural positions created in those organizations that I filled them initially. So I got to essentially build the departments and build the role. And that's a tremendous opportunity to be able to have a blank canvas. And the leadership that I worked for at the time in all three of those organizations let me do the painting, and the results worked out quite well. So I was honored and humbled by the fact that they had that level of trust and let me do that.
Okay, so that leads to a different question. So what are the three skill sets that were the individuals that appointed you felt you had to build out that canvas?
Well, they all believed I had the experience and expertise. So that worked out quite well. They all knew that I was interdisciplinary. And I think that was very important. And you'll see for readers, they'll understand what that really means when I talk about some of the countermeasures and prevention measures we put in place at different organizations to detect and deter and defend against what we were working on. And last but not least, I think I have decent people skills. I love people. And I embraced the folks who worked for me, worked with me. And I think that was critical. So between the expertise and experience, being interdisciplinary, and being interdisciplinary means you're going to be innovative. There was no one way to do something. I'm going to say this at the risk, and I don't want to sound arrogant, but in each of those three positions, I let the people who select me know, I'm not going to do this unless you want to be the best in the country, the state, or the world. And they said, okay, let's do it. And so it's worked out rather well that I've had that kind of latitude to try almost anything in furtherance of excellence and in furtherance of success of the mission.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So in the book, one of the other things, you explore both espionage and personal conviction. Which mission proved more challenging to you, or just how you approached it, protecting the nation or protecting your own integrity?
That's a really good question. I will say this. It was never a zero sum for me. It was never an either or question. I believe that both were paramount, both my personal conviction and commitment to the mission. Even playing the roles that I played, I never lost who I was in the process. And I didn't let that happen. You know, I could have very easily in either of those missions decided that I was going to play a role that the adversary expected me to have. Like the first undercover, that I was some aloof Black guy who, you know, got in trouble as a kid and didn't know right from wrong. And I wasn't going to do that. What I did is I spun it and enhanced my integrity by educating him and others about what Black folks can and do here, and that I was not the aberration when it came to people here. So it was very important to me to maintain my integrity. That was my personal conviction there, was to maintain my integrity while also maintaining the integrity of the mission. And in no case did that ever run up against each other with regards to me having to do or say something that I wasn't going to be able to hold true.
Okay. Great. Thank you. So Just a couple of more questions, and I may just have throw some rapid fire quick ones at you.
Okay.
What was there a particular chapter where you found the most difficult or most rewarding to write? If so, which one? And you can pick.
Okay. Well, I'll do both.
Okay.
Obviously, the most difficult and the hardest, and I will say this because I've had a number of people come to me now who are interested in writing memoirs, which I think is great. I don't think anyone should be able to tell your story except you. Chapter 10, Hijacked, when I was President Obama's nominee. And for those who already know the story, my nomination, despite, by the way, the TSA Assistant Secretary or Administrator is, I do believe, the only Senate confirmed appointment where you go through 2 full Senate hearings before you're up for a vote. And I successfully navigated both of them to be held by a senator, and then eventually I withdrew. That was very painful for obvious reasons. I mean, here I was, a young man like you from Jersey, who grew up and worked very hard. And never in my wildest dream did I expect 2 things to happen. A, we'd have a Black president, and B, I'd be his first nominee to head one of the largest entities of the nation's homeland security apparatus, which is the Transportation Security Administration. So it was huge to not be able to get confirmed and appointed. There were a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who supported me. And I will say this, that it was a tough decision, but it was the only decision I could make when I withdrew, because I was thinking of things much larger than Erroll. There was the president of the United States. The president, as you know, was trying to push through the Affordable Care Act, and he needed to focus on that. And, you know, I'm a big Star Wars guy too.
Yeah,
so
yeah, absolutely.
every year I when we have Halloween, I dress as Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Every year?
Every year.
Oh, wow.
And if you remember when he finally had that last face-off with Darth Vader, and Darth Vader said he was going to strike him down. He said, if you strike me down, I'll be more powerful than I was before. Well, that's how I felt when I withdrew from the nomination, because after that process was finished, the requests from around the world, because I had been President Obama's nominee and they knew what that meant, were just unbelievably countless with regards to access that it gave me. So that was the most difficult chapter to write. The most rewarding was chapter 2, School Me. And we've talked about some of that when I was bused across town. The things that happened as the only Black male in an elementary school, and growing up in a neighborhood where there was a elementary school 5 blocks from my house and having to go across town, to go to Brown University. And before I even got there, also to understand the close nexus between my family and my life and the slave trade, not just personally, but then the slave trade, as I found out when I got to Brown University, to become an activist at Brown, to the point of taking over a building for 2 days, which many people find shocking when they know my path to law enforcement. And of course, then to move on and become a professor. So chapter 2 was incredibly rewarding, as it really painted a picture based on the incredible and careful parenting that I had of what I could do given the support that I had at home and the opportunities that I had as I grew up.
Yeah, that was great. I love that. The last kind of question before I get to some rapid fire stuff, you know, if your father were sitting across from you today after reading your book, what conversation do you think the two of you would have?
Well, I'm a product of the civil rights era in the 60s, and my parents were staunch activists. If my father were alive today, he would see America and probably say, Erroll, I was only gone for a minute. What the hell happened?
Wow. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember going on marches with my parents and growing up, and all of the Supreme Court decisions that were determined along the way. He would have to wonder if it was a dream or in fact a nightmare. When he looks at America today, he would probably say, I thought we fought that battle. And I'd say, well, Dad, you did, but guess what? We're here again, and in some instances it's worse. So that's the conversation we would have. I would have to bring him up to speed on what's happened since he passed 13 years ago, in that short period of time, and how quickly systems, processes, and assumptions can be compromised given a certain amount of opportunity and will on the people who are doing that.
And that would be a great conversation.
It would be, but I will say this, Keith, he would be deeply, deeply disappointed. And that's just, words cannot describe his disappointment, knowing how hard he and others fought at that time to ensure civil rights and other things that took place in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed, and you could get into much deeper discussion, because I don't know if it's by design or just we haven't passed down enough of the history to our kids. It's very, fascinating. It could be a very fascinating conversation. Definitely.
It would be. And I have to say this, having parents who are educators, I got my own Black history at home every day. They made me know who the people were. They let me know what people did. They made sure I knew where I came from. And I've passed that on to my kids and my grandsons, because they need to know. It's very important. Most important to understand that we stand on the shoulders of those people who came before us, and that's why we're here today. And we're not going to be erased, and history is not going to be changed.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to go back, because I meant to ask this question.
Sure.
Because I was very moved by removing yourself from the nomination, because that takes a certain amount of courage to do. Normally, we're going to fight to the end. Someone's going to have to remove us. We're not really going to do it ourselves. So when you did that, was there, I don't remember much of a backlash from the Black community around you removing yourself. Was that the case, or was it because there were just so much going on at that time, it kind of got overlooked?
Both. There was backlash from the community. I can tell you here on a local level, Antonio Villaraigosa was the mayor. Everybody called me. The mayor spoke to Arnold, spoke to others. People were deeply disappointed, but they understood it was at the same time that President Obama was pushing through the Affordable Care Act and did not need any other issues to affect that outcome. So for me, easy decision. Look, I am not going to be some point of discussion that affects his furtherance of healthcare. And I wasn't the only person who withdrew during that time frame. I met several others who withdrew because of the fact that they were being held. And I want to say this, since we're talking about it. You can always cloture vote a nominee, and you can always recess appoint a nominee. And President Obama decided, we're not doing that. I want people to go through the process. I want there to be a vote, and they're going to be appointed. That's not how it is anymore. And I respect that. I respect his integrity, and so did everyone else. That's how the rules were set up. That's how the Constitution laid it out, and he played by those rules, and I really respect that. And if I had to do it over again, I would do the same thing. There was nothing more important than the president and this country. And I think I did the best thing and only thing I could have done at the time.
Okay. And before we get to the fun questions, last one, because I know you are in academia and there are sometimes young people that do listen. What are some of the things that they should do to prepare themselves for leadership, or just, the world and what they want to accomplish in life?
First of all, I'm happy to hear that there are still people who believe in academia. We have a notion now that academia is not important and you don't need it anymore. Well, I want to go on the record. There will never come a time on this planet where people who look like you and me have the luxury or the privilege of not having an education. And no one who is out there watching or listening to this should ever think that that's going to be the case. Because as soon as you don't have it, that will become the bar, the threshold that you'll have to meet, and you will not be prepared. The second thing I will say, and I think that they're doing a decent job of it, is they need to embrace the change that's coming with artificial intelligence and other things that are out there. I have students walking in now and saying things or asking me the question, Professor, what should I be doing knowing that AI is trying to take my job? And what they need to do is embrace AI and understand that they can enhance their opportunities with AI. So it's those kinds of things. I think they need to lean into mentorship and reach out to people who are their professors, who are their teachers, who are their deans, and talk to them, because we understand what the disciplines and the fields are demanding. And the fact that I'm not in the classroom as much as I was before doesn't slow the pace of people who reach out to me for mentoring and career development advice all the time. Take advantage of that. We want to see our students do well. So they should ask those questions. But I'm just happy to hear, I can tell you, speaking for the University of Southern California, there is no attrition in our applicant pool. And people want to go to universities. They want to be educated. And I'm encouraged by that, because I do know that there is this movement out there to decrease the importance of a formal education. We don't have that luxury, and don't ever believe that's going to be the case.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right, couple of fun questions, and then we'll close out. West Coast or East Coast?
Wow. Okay. You're putting me on the spot. I'm going to say this. I grew up on the East Coast. I'm glad that I did. I grew up 25 miles from Manhattan. I had an uncle who lived 2 blocks from the Apollo Theater. I mean, I've seen everybody, okay? Smokey Robinson, James Brown, Roberta Flack, Donny Hathaway for $7.50, gone to Broadway plays. What can I tell you? And so I'm happy. I went to a university in New England. I'm happy about that. But I hated the cold, Keith.
Oh, you okay?
Okay.
All right.
So,
all right.
When I told my father, I said, Dad, I'm moving to LA. He said, good for you. I'll come and visit. And he did. So I'm glad that I did. I'm happy I experienced the East Coast. It is very different. And I'm very proud of New Jersey. Myself and 3 other classmates graduated from a public high school in Scotch Plains Fanwood High School and went to Brown University, and we all graduated on time. So public education is important. My wife was a public education teacher here in Los Angeles for 21 years. It is important. I don't know that I can say that for across the country, but I'm really glad that I did that. At the same time, I gave my brother all of my winter clothes, and I don't wear them anymore.
Okay.
So
okay. All right. Well, you're not going to be able to be politically correct on this one. This called Lakers or Knicks?
Well, I'm a college basketball guy.
Okay.
And I'm a women's basketball guy.
Okay.
So there is no better team in the country, all due respect to Dawn Staley, than our USC Trojans. Watch them this year.
As long as Juju comes back.
Juju Watkins, Juju's back. Jazzy's back.
Okay.
We got 2 number 1 recruits at forward and guard. We are going to be scary this year. So I will say this,
That's
though. You're going to be disappointed, Keith. My dad, even though we lived, and you know where we lived in Jersey, he had season tickets to the 76ers.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, I mean, I get it. I understand. Okay. I understand. That's awesome.
But awesome. I will have to say this. I mean, all due respect. When I think Lakers, and there are some greats. I saw Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the commencement speaker for my wife when she graduated from UCLA. But all due respect to Kobe. Kobe was special. And I'm so glad he was a Laker, started and ended as a Laker, and I will always be proud of what he did on and off the court. And he has some incredible programs going on in South LA now. We have an entire gym that Vanessa built and a program that she's built out here.
Oh, nice.
And Kobe gave back. And I get emotional when I think about him now. He was special.
Great. So as we close out, give me one sentence or one word that should compel someone to read your book.
Well, I am not going to be original. I'm going to quote our frat brother, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it is the next to last line in the book where I wrote, Dr. Martin Luther King said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of convenience and comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." That's what I think we should live by. Look into that mirror and decide what you're going to do. And the only person who you can be honest with is the person who's looking back at you.
Great. Dr. Southers, thank you for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Pratt, and it's always a pleasure, and congratulations on your very successful show. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. As always, thank you for tuning into Black Men Speak, where we elevate conversations, empower perspectives, and amplify the voices of Black men who are building, leading, and redefining what's possible. If this episode challenged you, inspired you, or gave you something to think about, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a brother, a sister, a friend, or someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper, exclusive conversations, behind-the-scenes content, bonus episodes, and direct access to our growing community, join the Black Men Speak Patreon family. That's where the real locker room talk happens. That's where we build. You can support the movement and become a member today by visiting our Patreon page. Every subscription helps us continue telling powerful stories that matter. Until next time, keep speaking truth, keep building legacy, and remember, your voice is power. This is Keith Dent from the Black Men Speak podcast. Peace.
When you need to send the perfect rose bouquet, only one brand can say they've been the floral authority for 50 years. 1-800-Flowers. Why should you trust 1-800-Flowers? They hand-select every stem to ensure top quality. And with nationwide delivery, smiles and satisfaction are 100% guaranteed. And right now, when you order a dozen multicolored roses, we'll double it at no extra cost. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Order today at 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.